Wine sat quickly on the edge of her bed, her trembling fingers carefully applying ointment to the bruises on her hands. Tears streamed silently down her cheeks, each drop reflecting the storm of emotions she was battling inside. Her reflection in the mirror across the room only deepened the ache in her heart. Her voice broke the silence, soft and filled with despair, as she spoke to herself. Why does he treat me like this? What have I done to deserve this pain? She paused, her hand freezing mid motion as her thoughts spiraled deeper. Is it because of my brother? His sister died because of him, but I never even knew her. I never saw her face. How could he blame me for something I wasn't even part of? The idea lingered painfully in her mind, but it didn't make sense. Was there something more? Another reason for his unrelenting cruelty? Her gaze flickered toward the corner of the room, and her heart clenched as a vivid image of the photo frame came to her mind. It was the one she had noticed before, tucked away on his wardrobe, a photograph of a girl she didn't recognize. The thought pierced her like a dagger. Did Jungkook love someone? Her voice was barely a whisper now, as though saying it aloud would make it hurt more. She wiped her tears quickly, shaking her head as if to dispel the thought, but the question lingered. What was in that photo and why did it seem so important to him? Her mind churned with curiosity and an unsettling fear. The answer to her torment might lie in that picture, but did she have the courage to confront it? The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting a golden hue across the kitchen as Wine busied herself preparing breakfast. She worked quietly, her movements precise and careful, hoping that today, just maybe, Jungkook would find no fault. She placed the scrambled eggs and toast on the plate with trembling hands, her heart pounding in her chest. She set the table. She glanced toward the clock. He would be coming down any minute now. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Moments later, Jungkook appeared in the doorway, his presence commanding and suffocating all at once. Dressed in a crisp black shirt, his expression was cold and unreadable. As his eyes flicked over the table, without a word, he sat down and took a bite of the eggs. Wine watched him anxiously, her fingers nervously fiddling with the edge of her apron. But then his fork clattered against the plate and his jaw tightened. He looked up at her, his eyes dark with displeasure. What is this? His voice was low and icy, sending chills down her spine. I made breakfast for you, I thought. He stood abruptly, cutting her off. You thought, don't you know, I hate when my food isn't perfect. Wine's heart sank as he grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward him with an unforgiving grip. You can't even do something as simple as this, right? Do you enjoy disappointing me, Wine? Tears brimmed in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I tried my best, she whispered, her voice trembling. His grip tightened and he dragged her little away from dining table. Trying isn't good enough, you need to learn your place. Before Wine could protest, Jungkook's punishments began. He pushed her to her knees, his tone harsh as he reprimanded her. The humiliation stung more than the physical pain, but she bore it silently, her tears finally spilling as she bit her lip to hold back a sob. The front door creaked open and Jackson stepped inside, his cheerful expression fading the moment he saw the scene before him. Jackson froze, his breath hitching as he took in the sight of his sister on the floor, her trembling form and tear streaked face. With Jungkook standing over her like a menacing shadow. Wine, his voice was barely a whisper, but it catch Jungkook's attention. Jungkook turned his head sharply, his cold gaze locking onto Jackson. Who stood rooted in place, tears streaming down his face. What are you doing to her? His voice cracked, a mix of anger and heartbreak. Wine's head shot up, panic flashing in her eyes as she saw her brother. Jackson, no, please just go. But Jackson didn't move. He clenched his fists, his tear falling freely now. How could you do this to her, Jungkook? She's your wife. Jungkook's expression didn't change, but his grip on Wine's arm loosened slightly. He straightened, his voice calm but laced with menace. This is between me and my wife. You have no place here. Jackson stepped forward, his voice trembling with rage. No place, she's my sister, and I won't stand by and watch you hurt her like this. White scrambled to her feet, standing between the two men, her hands outstretched as if to stop a fight before it started. Jackson, please just leave. Don't make this worse. Jackson's eyes softened as they met hers, his heart breaking at the sight of her pleading face. Why? I can't just walk away from this. Jungkook's cold laugh cut through the tension. Then maybe you should stay and see what happens when someone interferes in my business. Jackson's jaw clenched, but he stayed silent. His mind racing as he tried to figure out how to get his sister out of this nightmare. Meanwhile, Wine stood frozen, torn between her fear of Jungkook and her love for her brother. The room was thick with tension, and for a moment, everything hung in the balance. Jungkook got a call and went from there. Jackson clenched his fists at his sides, his heart heavy with a mix of rage and helplessness. Wine's tearful eyes pleaded with him to leave. And though every fiber of his being screamed to stay and protect her, he reluctantly turned to go. This isn't over, Wine. He said softly, his voice trembling as he glanced back at her one last time. His eyes met hers. And the silent promise in his gaze lingered before he stepped out of the house. The door clicking shut behind him, the silence that followed was stiffening, broken only by Wine's shaky breaths. She remained on her knees, the cold floor biting into her skin, her legs ached. And the pain was becoming unbearable. But she didn't dare move. Jungkook picked up his phone from the nearby table as it vibrated loudly, his sharp tone cutting through the tension. What? He faced the room as he listened to the voice on the other end, his expression hardening. The call was brief, but whatever he had heard didn't improve his mood. He ended the call with a sharp tap. Tossing the phone back onto the table before turning his gaze to Wine, his lips curved into a chilling smirk as he approached her, crouching down to meet her eye level. Still here, sweetheart. I thought you would be begging for mercy by now. Wine's hands trembled as she clasped them tightly in front of her. She hesitated for a moment, her voice barely above a whisper. Can I ask something? Jungkook raised an eyebrow, amusement flickering in his dark eyes. Why so eager? We're not done with your punishment yet. He leaned closer, his voice dripping with mockery. But sure, let's hear it. What's so important you would interrupt this lovely little moment? Wine swallowed hard, her heart racing. The photo frame, the one in your wardrobe. Who is she? The smirk on Jungkook's face vanished in an instant, replaced by a dangerous glint in his eyes. He straightened, his jaw tightening as he stared down at her. You are really pushing your luck, are not you? Wine flinched at his tone but mustered the courage to continue. I want to know, why is it so important? Does she mean something to you? Jungkook's nostrils flared as he took a step closer, towering over her. You don't get to ask me that. He hissed, his voice low and threatening. You don't get to question what matters to me. His hand shot out, grabbing her chin and forcing her to look up at him. But since you are so curious, let me make one thing clear. His grip tightened slightly, making her wince. If you ever bring her up again, you will regret it more than you already do. Once heart sank, and she felt a fresh wave of tears threaten to spill. She had not expected such a violent reaction, but now she knew one thing for sure: whoever that girl was, she had a hold on Jungkook that Wine couldn't compete with. The house was eerily silent, the only sound coming from the soft ticking of the clock in the corner of the living room. Jungkook sat on the couch, leaning back with one leg crossed over the other, his sharp gaze fixed on Wine. She sat on the armchair opposite him, her hands resting nervously in her lap. Neither spoke. But the tension between them was thick, suffocating. Suddenly, the soft shim of Vine's phone broke the silence. The sound was almost too loud in the stillness. And her heart skipped a beat. As she glanced down at the screen, Jungkook's piercing eyes immediately flicked toward her, studying her every moment. Who is it? His tone was calm but carried an undercurrent of suspicion. Wine hesitated, her pulse quickening as she saw the name on the screen. Unknown, her mind raced. Now, this message felt like a ticking time bomb in her hands. Hey, remember me? I'm the guy we met at the party. Wine's fingers trembled slightly as she debated whether to reply. Jungkook's eyes never left her face. His stare so intense it felt like he could see through her. She swallowed hard and quickly typed back. He said, remember, don't text me. Her hands moved swiftly to delete the message thread, erasing any evidence of the conversation. She placed the phone back on the table, trying to appear as though nothing had happened. Who is that? His voice was sharper now, his head tilting slightly as he observed her reaction. Wine forced a smile, hoping it didn't look as nervous as she felt. Oh, it was just a company's promotional message, something about a new offer. Jungkook didn't say anything immediately. He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees as he continued to watch her. A promotional message, huh? His lips curled into a faint smirk, but his eyes were cold. Interesting. How that got you so nervous? Wine's heart sank. She knew Jungkook didn't believe her, but she couldn't let him find out about that stranger. He nodded quickly, her voice trembling slightly. Yeah, it catch me off guard, that's all. Jungkook leaned back against the couch, his eyes narrowing as he considered her response. If you say so, sweetheart. But Wine could tell by the edge in his voice that this wasn't over. He didn't like unanswered questions, and she had just given him one. Jungkook's eyes lingered on her for a moment longer, as if weighing the truth behind her words. Then, without warning, he leaned back and crossed his arms, his smirk transforming into something that made Wine's stomach churn. An offer, huh? Must be a good one to make you look so flustered. Wine's lips parted slightly, unsure of how to respond. But before she could, Jungkook's voice dropped into a chillingly casual tone. Let's go, then. Wine blinked in confusion. Go where? Shopping? His words were deceptively large, but his gaze was sharp, cutting through her like a blade. You said it's a promotional offer. Maybe you need something new dresses, jewelry, whatever you want. Her heart skipped a beat, but she quickly shook her head. I don't need anything, Jungkook. I already have more than enough dresses. Really, there is no need. The tension in the room shifted instantly. Jungkook's smirk disappeared, replaced by a hard, menacing look. He stood slowly, towering over her as the air grew heavy with his displeasure. Did I ask if you needed anything? His voice was low, each word precise and cutting. When I say we are going, we are going. Or do you plan on just weighing me now too? Wine's pulse quickens. She could feel the fury simmering beneath his calm facade, and she knew better than to push him further. Lowering her gaze, she nodded quickly, I'll get ready. Jungkook's lips curled into a satisfied smirk, but the sharpness in his eyes didn't fade. That's my good girl. Don't keep me waiting. She hurried upstairs, her mind racing. The sudden shift in his demeanor had left her shaken, and she couldn't help but wonder what he was planning. As he changed into a simple yet elegant dress, she stole a glance at herself in the mirror. Why does he have to be like this? Why can't I ever just say no? When she came back downstairs, Jungkook was waiting, his dark eyes scanning her from head to toe. Perfect. Let's go. Wine followed him silently, her heart heavy as she braced herself for whatever the day had in store. The ride to the mall was steeped in silence, except for the hum of the car engine. Wine sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring out the window. Trying to prepare herself for whatever storm might come. Jungkook's grip on the steering wheel was firm, his jaw clenched as he navigated through the bustling streets. When they arrived, he stepped out and walked around to her side, opening the door for her. His actions were calm, almost gentlemanly, but the flicker of annoyance in his eyes told her his anger still simmered beneath the surface. As they walked through the grand entrance of the luxury shopping mall, one tried to match his face, her heart hammering in her chest. Chunguk guided her into an exclusive boutique, the kind where the staff bowed deeply as soon as they entered. Pick something. His tone was neutral, but the command was clear. Wine hesitated, glancing at the racks of designer dresses. I told you I don't need anything. Jungkook's gaze darkened as he stepped closer to her. I didn't bring you here for your opinion, Wine. Pick something. Her hands trembled slightly as she began browsing, knowing he was watching her every move. She eventually picked out a modest dress, hoping it would satisfy him. That's it. He stepped forward, his tall frame towering over her as he plucked the dress from her hands. Do you think so little of yourself, sweetheart? You deserve the best. Before she could respond, he signaled to the staff, pointing out several other dresses without even glancing at the price tags. After purchasing everything he chose, they left the boutique arms weighed down by bags. As they walked back to the car, one finally worked up the courage to speak. You didn't have to do it all that. It's too much. Jungkook stopped abruptly, causing her to nearly bump into him. He turned to face her, his expression a mixture of anger and something softer, something she couldn't quite place. Too much. His voice was quieter now, but no less intense. You're my wife, fine, whether you like it or not, and if I want to spoil you, I will. She stared up at him, her lips parting in surprise. This was different. Jungkook wasn't yelling, wasn't mocking her. He seemed almost sincere. But then, just as quickly as the moment came, his expression hardened again. But don't mistake this for kindness. He stepped closer, his fingers gently brushing against her cheek, making her flinch. You still need to learn your place, sweetheart. And if you push me again, I won't be so soft next time. Wine swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to say something, anything, but his piercing gaze left her speechless. He leaned down slightly, his lips brushing against her ear. Now, let's go home. I'm not done with you yet. The drive back was just as tense as the journey there. But wine couldn't shake the memory of his fleeting softness. It was a side of Jungkook she had never seen before, and despite her better judgment, it left her questioning everything. The ride back home took an unexpected turn when Jungkook abruptly pulled the car over near the cafe. Wine looked up confused as a woman waved enthusiastically from the sidewalk. She was stunning, dressed in a chic outfit that screamed confidence. Minji, he called out, stepping out of the car with a grin. Wine frowned, watching as the woman rushed over to hug him. Her arms lingered around his neck, a little too long for Wine's liking. From the passenger seat, Wine could hear their laughter as they exchanged pleasantries. Minji's hand found its way to Jungkook's arm, lightly brushing against him. As they talked, the sight made something stir uncomfortably in Wine's chest, a foreign feeling she didn't want to acknowledge. Jungkook glanced back at her through the window. His sharp eyes catching the faint pout on her lips. A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. He knew, turning back to Minji, he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice so Wine couldn't hear. But his body language was loud enough to send her into a quiet storm. His fingers brushed Minji's as they spoke, and he laughed at something she said. The deep, rich sound grating on Wine's nerves. She couldn't take it anymore. With a huff, she pushed open the car door and stormed off toward a nearby ice cream stall, her steps brisk. Chongok noticed immediately, his smirk vanishing. He excused himself from Minji with a curt note and followed her with his gaze. Irritation flickering in his eyes, Wine stood at the stall, pretending to examine the flavors, though her mind was still reeling from the scene she had just witnessed. When the vendor handed her the ice cream, she reached into her pocket only to freeze. She had no money. Of course, she didn't. Jungkook never gave her any, and she never asked. The vendor, confused, tilted his head. Miss, the payment. Wine hesitated, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. She glanced at the vendor, then at the ice cream, her lips parting awkwardly. How does money look like? She mumbled under her breath, barely audible. Before the vendor could respond, a shadow loomed over her. She looked up to see Jungkook standing beside her, his jaw tight and his dark eyes boring into her. Without a word, he pulled out his wallet, handed the money to the vendor, and grabbed her wrist, dragging her away from the stall. Are you out of your mind? His voice was low, barely restrained as they stopped near the car. You walked off without saying a word. What if something happened to you? Wine glared up at him, yanking her wrist free. You were busy. She snapped, the jealousy still bubbling under the surface. I didn't want to disturb your little reunion. Jungkook's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a smart smile. Ah, so that's what this is about. He stepped closer, his voice dropping into a teasing whisper. You were jealous, were not you? You came here without telling me, huh? You deserve a punishment. He smirked. Let's go, miss. Your punishment is waiting for you.